It's good to be in the house of the Lord. All right, we're going to turn to the book of Numbers again this morning as we continue our Sunday school series, God's Revelation unto His Children. Miss Ada approves. Hey, Ada. Hey. Hey, good to see you. All right, so Numbers, she was fine. Oh. All right, Numbers chapter 12 will get us a little bit of catch up on where we're at. As you know, we've been going through the revelation of God unto His children throughout the calling of Moses, the redemption from the land of Egypt, now here in the wilderness, on the cusp of entering Canaan's land, the land of promise, the land that God had promised unto them many years prior. And through all of this, through our lessons, we've learned several things. We learned how God is a sovereign God, amen. He is above all, there is none like unto Him. He is transcendent helper. He is outside of His creation. He's not a created being, but we are His creation. And so He's outside of His creation and therefore not subject to the limitations found therein. Of course, He is our helper. He is promise keeper. Every promise He's ever made, He either has kept or will keep. Amen. That's the confidence I have in God. I have that in God because He's proved Himself to do it time and time again. And so He's promise keeper. He is redeemer. He is leader. He is provider. He is instructor. He is glorious. He is atoner. He is gracious, and He is powerful. And we'll get into that here in a little bit. Right now, the children of Israel have been taken from the land of Egypt. They have been provided for with the manna from heaven, water from a rock, and they, in the beginning of this lesson, God had provided for the children of Israel, but yet they murmured against God and complained against Him and what He had done for them. Evidently, it wasn't satisfactory in their opinion. They wanted flesh to eat, and so they murmured about that, and God gave it to them. But that's not the only thing God gave to them. He gave them that, and while the Bible tells us while the flesh was still in their teeth, God had judged them for it and killed them. And it's that's kind of one of those stark reminders of careful what you wish for, right? And so that's what they got it. They got what they wanted, and what they wanted did not bring them any pleasure at all. They thought it would. They expected it to, that flesh would bring them some sort of pleasure that they were lacking, but it didn't. All it did was it brought pain, and it brought judgment. And there's many a people, and this is they went from Egypt unto Canaan's land. I mean, it was a direct route initially. And the reason it was is because that's where God wanted them, right? God wanted them in Canaan's land. God had promised it to them. God had prepared it for them. As we'll see in our text, I think it was Caleb, either Caleb or Joshua. They said, those inhabitants there, they're bread for us. They're nothing. God had prepared for them to take it. And so that's where God wanted them. And you know the story, that's where they would end up. That is where they would end up, but not for 40 years from now. And so in chapter 12, we looked at chapter 11, they craved the meat, and then God had responded with that. In chapter 12, Miriam and Aaron criticized Moses. Miriam was judged for it, and as I was looking through this morning, the Lord gave me a thought for a message. Go ahead and turn with me to Numbers chapter 12. Numbers chapter 12, verse number 4. It says this. Let's just start in verse number 1. It says, "And Miriam and Aaron spake against Moses because of the Ethiopian woman whom he had married. For he had married an Ethiopian woman. And they said, Hath the Lord indeed spoken only by Moses? Hath he not spoken also by us? And the Lord heard it. Now the man Moses was very meek above all the men which were upon the face of the earth." In verse number 4, this is what I was wanting to get to. "And the Lord spake suddenly unto Moses, and unto Aaron, and unto Miriam. Come out ye three unto the tabernacle of the congregation," and the three came out. The thought I had was, when God speaks to you, are you going to like what he has to say? Because God was speaking to them directly. Spoke unto Moses as he had oftentimes did. But here we see him speaking unto Aaron and Miriam. And it was not a pleasant conversation at all. And so, I believe more men and women will stand before the face of God and hear the voice of God and be displeased with what they hear as opposed to those that are going to be pleased. I believe it's going to happen, of course, at the great white throne judgment, as those that are dead stand before him and cast into the lake of fire. I believe it's also going to be disheartening for many Christians. Many Christians who have trusted in the Lord Jesus Christ are on their way to heaven. I'm on my way to heaven, amen. I hope you are, and if you are, I'm glad you are. And like it or not, you're going to spend eternity with me. But the fact of the matter is, heaven is wonderful, but that's not what it's all about. It's not simply about getting to heaven. Church, it's about seeing others get there too. And so if we understand that and we focus upon that, then we can seek to do that. And the more we do that, the more pleasing we are unto God, the more we strive to see souls saved, and the more pleasant things we'll hear as we stand before the Lord. I don't want Christians, I don't want you to be under the false assumption that once we get to heaven, everything will be perfect and there will be no heartache or anything like that, because the fact of the matter is we will stand and be judged by God. We will. All of us will. And I'll not be judged for my salvation that was taken care of by Jesus upon the cross of Calvary, but I will be judged, just as all Christians will, on what they have done with what God has given them. And you can read in 1 Corinthians, I believe, Paul speaks about that. Book of Romans, he speaks about that, the judgment seat of Christ. So I encourage you to look it up. Would not want you to be ignorant when you stand before him. So they, Miriam and Aaron criticized Moses. It displeased God, and Moses did not have to defend himself, for God did. And I said this during, I think, Sunday night's message, because I'd referenced this passage of Scripture, and all there is really to say about it is, if you're going to speak against the man of God, make sure that that he is on the wrong side of God and not you. And that's important. And so we see that happening there. God strikes Miriam with leprosy. She's set outside the camp for 7 days, and then she's brought back in, and they move on. Chapter 13, we see they're on the cusp of Canaan's land. Verse number 1, the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Send thou men, that they may search the land of Canaan, which I have given to the children of Israel. Every tribe of their fathers shall ye send a man, every one a ruler among you. And Moses, by the commandment of the Lord, sent them into the wilderness of Paran, and those men were heads of the children of Israel. And it goes down and names those that came out of the tribes. And verses 17 down, Moses sent them to spy out the lands. Verse 18, see the land, what it is, the people that dwell therein, whether they be strong or weak, few or many, and what the land is that they dwell in. And it's amazing. Now think about this. Think about this for just a moment. We see in verse number 1, the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Send thou men. So when Moses sent the men into Canaan's land, it was by God's command, right? God said, do this. Now, and then you see the instruction that Moses sent them to spy out the land. He said, and to see the land, what it is, a people that dwell, and so he tells them, check it out. Let us know what you find. This is not Moses, this wasn't Moses wanting to see if they could do it. He was doing this by the command of God. So why would God have them do that? Why would God direct Moses to send these spies out? Because let me tell you what, he knew what they would say. He knew what those spies were going to come back and say. It's not like God was interested in what they would do. God knew the end from the beginning, right? So why did he do this? Why did he send them into that? So he sent the spies in. They go into Canaan's land, and we see in verse number 21. So they went up and searched the land from the wilderness of Zin unto Rehob, as men came to Hamath, and they ascended by the south and came unto Hebron. Now make note of that, and we'll address it here in a second. Where Ahiman, Sheshai, and Talmai, the children of Anak, were. And if you can pronounce those better, have at it. Now Hebron was built 7 years before Zoan in Egypt, and they came unto the brook Eshcol, and cut down from thence a branch from one cluster of grapes, and they bare it between two upon a staff, and they brought of the pomegranates and of the figs the place that they called the brook Eshcol, because the cluster of grapes which the children of Israel cut down from thence, and they returned from searching the land after 40 days. So they went in there 40 days, so went and looked at it, and man, it is by all accounts, by all the accounts of all 12 spies, not just 2, but all 12, it was a land flowing with milk and honey. Surely it was a good land, they said. And they showed him the fruit of the land, verse number 26. He said in verse number 27, and he told him, we came unto the land whither thou sentest, and surely it floweth with milk and honey, and this is the fruit thereof, fruit of it. And they showed him that great big cluster of grapes that took 2 to bear it. But verse number 28 happens. And verse number 28, we see that first word in there. What is that first word? Nevertheless. In other words, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that it is an exceeding great land. It does not matter that that's wonderful bounty that God has brought us to. Nevertheless, the people be strong that dwell in the land. And the cities are walled and very great. And moreover, we saw the children of Anak there. In other words, man, not just the walls, not just the people, but man, the children of Anak are there. Those giants, man, they're there. And so there's no way. And they began to give this evil report. The Amalekites dwell in the land of the south. The Hittites, the Jebusites, the Amorites dwell in the mountains. The Canaanites dwell by the sea and by the coast of Jordan. And so they're riling up the people. They're getting on the people saying, man, this is crazy. This is crazy talk. Anybody ever say that? It's crazy talk. I mean, yes, it's great. But you know what? It's theirs. It's theirs. We have no way. It's far too great for us. Verse number 30, Caleb stands up. He stills the people before Moses and said, let us go up at once and possess it. For we are well able to overcome it. Now, Caleb saw the same thing as did Gadiel, Paltai, Egal, Amiel, Sether. He saw the same thing, right? Saw the same thing as all those others. But he had a completely different opinion on it. He had a completely different viewpoint on it. They said, there's no way we could do it. Verse number 30, and Caleb stilled the people before Moses and said, let us go up at once. Let's not even hesitate. There's no point to. I mean, why are we standing here talking? We are in the wilderness. We are eating this manna. Did you not see the grapes over there? Did you not see the pomegranates? Did you not see the figs? We brought them back to show you. We're well able. And so we see two completely different viewpoints of the same exact thing that they all witnessed. But they are looking at it from two completely different standpoints. But the men that went up with him said, we be not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we. And they brought up an evil report of the land which they had searched unto the children of Israel, saying, the land which we have gone up to search it is a land that eateth up the inhabitants thereof, and all the people that we saw in it are men of great stature. And there we saw the giants, the sons of Anak, which come of the giants. And we were in our own sight as grasshoppers, and so we were in their sight. And so, one of the things that I wanted to make mention of, that I told you back up, we'd go there again, is found in verse number 22. And it says, and they ascended by the south and came unto where? Where did they go? Hebron. Does anybody know what maybe they should have remembered about this place that they went to? Turn with me to Genesis chapter 23. Genesis chapter 23. You there? Say amen. Genesis chapter 23, this was, of course, the story of Abraham and Sarah. Abraham being the patriarch, being the beginning of the Jewish people. And Sarah was 107 and 20 years old. These were the years of the life of Sarah. And Sarah died in Kirjath Arba. The name is what? Hebron, in the land of Canaan. Now turn with me on over to chapter 25. Verse number 7. And these are the days of the years of Abraham's life which he lived, 160 years. Then Abraham gave up the ghost and died in a good old age, an old man and full of years, and was gathered to his people. And his sons Isaac and Ishmael buried him in the cave Machpelah in the field of Ephron, the son of Zoar the Hittite, which is before Mamre. The field which Abraham purchased of the sons of Heth, there was Abraham buried, and who? Sarah his wife. Turn on over to chapter 35. Chapter 35. Verse 27, and Jacob came unto Isaac his father, unto Mamre, unto the city of Arba, which is what? Hebron, where Abraham and Isaac sojourned. And the days of Isaac were 180 years, and Isaac gave up the ghost and died, and was gathered unto his people. Being old and full of days, the sons of Esau and Jacob buried him. If you go on to chapter 50, one more time. Chapter 50. Verse number 12. And his sons did unto him according as he commanded them, for his sons carried him into the land of Canaan and buried him in the cave of the field of Machpelah, which Abraham bought with the field for a possession of a burying place of Ephron the Hittite before Mamre. And Joseph returned into Egypt, he and his brethren, all that went up with him to bury his father after he had buried his father. And so here they were. They were in the land of promise, the land in which they had at one point in time, the land in which Sarah was buried, Abraham was buried, Isaac was buried, Israel was buried. All of these, all of the ones who had lived by faith and received the promises of God, that's where they were. They were there. You would think that as they were there, they would look and say, man, you remember what God did for Abraham? Do you remember what God did for Isaac and how the wells were open? You remember what God did for Jacob? We are his heritage. We are the fulfillment of one of the promises in which God had done. And this is another one, this place right here. And so anyway, they saw, and they would have had to have. It was mentioned, it was of what? The two places, I think, that were mentioned in their wanderings. Hebron was one of them. So they would remember the God of promise and how he had fulfilled promises in the past. Now, I've said it before, church. Let me say it again. The past is a promise. What God has done, God can do, and God certainly will do. And so they saw that. It didn't matter. It didn't matter what happened in the past. It didn't matter how God had moved unto Abram. It didn't matter how God would open the loins of a 100-year-old man and the womb of a 90-year-old woman. None of that mattered to them. They were all there. They were all there. They were the fruit. They were ultimately, every one of them there was the fruit of what came from a 100-year-old man and a 90-year-old woman. Think about that for a minute. And so, it didn't matter. They continued on. Caleb tried to steal them, and the 10 cried out against him. And then we see in chapter 14, all the congregation lifted up their voice and cried, and the people wept that night. And all the children of Israel murmured against Moses and against Aaron, and the whole congregation said unto them, would God that we had died in the land of Egypt, or would God had we died in this wilderness? Remember what we said earlier, be careful what you wish for. If you go to verse number 29, you'll find that all of those that were responsible for making this decision did exactly that. Verse number 29, your carcasses, this is God's promise unto them, your carcasses shall fall in the wilderness, and all that were numbered of you, according to your whole numbers, from 20 years old and upward, which have murmured against me. Verse number 33, and your children shall wander in the wilderness 40 years and bear your whoredoms until your carcasses be wasted in the wilderness. And so here they were. Oh, man, we should just die here. God said, okay. Verse number 3, and wherefore hath the Lord brought us into this land to fall by the sword, that our wives and our children should be prey? Were it not better for us to return into Egypt? And they said one to another, let us make a captain, and let us return into Egypt. So the man in which God had used to bring them out of slavery and bring them into the wilderness on the cusp of the promise of God, they said, let's get us another one. Verse number 6, and Joshua the son of Nun and Caleb the son of Jephunneh, which were of them that searched the land, rent their clothes. And they spake unto all the company of the children of Israel, saying, the land which we passed through to search it is an exceeding good land. If the Lord delight in us, then he will bring us into this land and give it us, a land that which floweth with milk and honey. Only rebel not ye against the Lord, and neither fear ye the people of the land, for they are bread for us. Their defense is departed from them, and the Lord is with us. Fear them not. And we see the minority of the 12 that went in there. They're still standing up, and they're still trying to convince the people that what God has promised he will perform. Verse number 10, but all the congregation bade stone them with stones. And the glory of the Lord appeared in the tabernacle of the congregation before all the children of Israel. And the Lord said unto Moses, how long will this people provoke me? And how long will it be ere they believe me, And isn't that what it boils down to? I mean, really, that's all it boiled down to. Just believing God. For all the signs which I have showed among them, I will smite them with pestilence, and disinherit them, and will make of thee a greater nation and mightier than they. And Moses said unto the Lord, which he could have done and still have fulfilled his promises. You know that, right? He could have done that and still fulfilled his promises because Moses was of the seed of Abraham. And so his promises would not have been disannulled. He would have just killed them all instead of just those 20 and upward. Starting over with Moses. And verse number 13, Moses said unto the Lord, then the Egyptians shall hear it, for thou broughtest up this people in thy might from among them, and they will tell it to the inhabitants of the land. For they have heard that the Lord art among his people, that thou, Lord, art seen face to face, that thy cloud standeth over them, and that thou goest before them by day time in a pillar of cloud and in a pillar of fire by night. Now if thou shalt kill all this people as one man, then the nations which have heard the fame of thee will speak, saying, because the Lord was not able to bring this people into the land which he sware unto them, therefore he hath slain them in the wilderness. And now I beseech thee, let the power of my Lord be great, according as thou hast spoken, saying, the Lord is longsuffering and of great mercy, forgiving iniquity and transgression, and by no means clearing the guilty, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children unto the third and fourth generation. Pardon, I beseech thee, the iniquity of this people, according unto the greatness of thy mercy, and not for the goodness of them, but the greatness of his mercy, and as thou hast forgiven this people from Egypt even until now. And the Lord said, I have pardoned according to thy word, and as truly as I live, all the earth shall be filled with the glory of the Lord, because all those men which have seen my glory and my miracles, which I did in Egypt and in the wilderness, and have tempted me now these 10 times, have not hearkened to my voice. Surely they shall not see the land which I swear unto their fathers, neither shall any of them that provoked me see it. But my servant Caleb, which he had another spirit with him, and hath followed me fully, him will I bring into the land wherein he went, and his seed shall possess it. It continues on, and we've already touched on the remainder of down to verse number 35, and that was that he had proclaimed that those 20 and upward would fall in the wilderness. They would not see the promised land. They would not get to experience what it would be like to go out into your backyard and pick a cluster of grapes that it would take 2 men to carry. They would never experience the joy that being in the perfect will of God would bring forth. They just could not experience it. We're going to find out after this proclamation of God what happens. But let's just park here for just a moment and finish this up. This lesson that we have, it finishes up at the end of verse number 35. But the children of Israel, let me just ask you this. Was God able to give it to them? He was able, right? He was able to give it to them. Yet they did not experience it. Why? It was what? It's conditional upon what? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, what did they lack from receiving that? Mm-hmm. Yep. And we know that God is able because, after this generation would pass, Moses would sin. He would not get to inherit it either. Moses being a picture of the law. Listen, the law will get you up to Canaan's land, but it cannot get you in Canaan's land. And so there's a great lesson right there. But Moses would not be able to experience Canaan's land either because of his sin. But what they lacked in enjoying all that, and like I said, it just boils down to something very simple, and it's something that we've talked about, and that is faith. They lacked faith. And faith is simply just taking God for what He said. If God said it, then He'll do it, right? And so that's why they did not enjoy it. That's why they could not enjoy it. Because God had promised it for them. They didn't believe Him. Rather, they desired to return unto the way things were, unto the way they were, and God had punished them for it. Now, and that's going to kind of close out this lesson here. The next one picks up with verse number 36 to 45. And I want to read that, and we'll touch on that. Read that and touch on that, and then we'll go ahead and close up. I'm not going to, well, just go ahead, and if you have your books, you can turn to lesson 11. I am powerful proclaimer. We see Israel's rebellion. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. It's a very good point. Very good point. So in this, just to finish out this chapter of chapter 14, Moses goes to break the news to the children of Israel. And we have, now listen, there's essentially two judgments that happens in what has taken place here prior to this, and in what is getting ready to take place. Because there was two different parties, and God separated those two. You had those that believed the evil report, and you had those that gave it. Those that believed it, and those that gave it. Remember, it's... You break down what the body did. The body did not believe God. The body believed the 10. And the body based their actions on the 10. They based their decisions on the 10. And let me tell you what, whenever you are basing your decisions on what man says instead of what God says, you're going to find yourself in a whole heap of trouble. It was true then, and it's true now. And so there was a price that was paid by all of those 20 years and upward. And the case can be made that it was every single solitary soul that was 20 years and upward that murmured or that was swayed to go back. But then again, maybe it wasn't. And regardless of how you look at that, the fact of the matter remains in that there was some that could not enjoy their congregation being in Canaan's land because the majority chose not to believe God. And we see again two classes of people, two different judgments, separation and division that God made. You had some that were just believed it, and so therefore they were going to die in the wilderness. They would not enjoy it. You had some that proclaimed it, and we see what happens then. Verse number 36, it says, "And the men which Moses sent to search the land, who returned and made all the congregation to murmur against him by bringing up a slander upon the land. even those men that did bring up the evil report upon the land died by the plague before the Lord. But Joshua the son of Nun and Caleb the son of Jephunneh, which were the men went to search the land, lived still. And Moses told these things unto all the children of Israel, and the people mourned greatly. And they rose up early in the morning, and gat them up unto the top of the mountain, saying, Lo, we be here, and we'll go up unto the place which the Lord hath promised, for we hath sinned. And so you see that those that believed it, they were going to die in the wilderness. Those that spoke it were judged then, died by a plague, and now they realize their error. But church, it was too late. It was too late. They recognized, we see it in verse number 7, man, we have sinned. And Moses says, man, don't go now. You see, God said to go before, and you wouldn't do it. God said you can't now, and now you're going to try to do it. Let me tell you what, it's not going to be good. That's southern. That is the southern version of the Bible. That's what it says right there. The southern slang version. That's what, everybody and their brother wants to try to do better what God has already done himself. I'll just go ahead and do that. We'll do the southern slang version of the Word of God. And it'll be filled with a lot of y'alls. Amen. All right. Thank you, Brother Dylan, for laughing. All right. It was supposed to be funny. All right. So anyway, Moses said, Wherefore now do ye transgress the commandment of the Lord? But it shall not prosper. Go not up, for the Lord is not among you. And that was the key. That was the key. Caleb, Joshua, they said, we're well able to take it. They're bread for us, but they wouldn't do it. And they were saying that because of what in chapter 14, verse number 8, if the Lord delight in us, then he will bring us into the land and give it us, a land which floweth with milk and honey. Or rebel not against the Lord. And so they understood the key to it all. The key to it all was not their strength. And that's what the 10 said. We're not able to do it. Caleb said, yes, we are. And in verse number chapter 14, he elaborated why. Because the Lord was on their side. The Lord had promised, and therefore they could do it. But now things have changed. Moses said, Wherefore now do you transgress the commandment of the Lord, but it shall not prosper. Go not up, for the Lord is not among you, that ye be not smitten before your enemies. For the Amalekites and the Canaanites are there before you, and ye shall fall by the sword, because ye are turned away from the Lord. Therefore the Lord will not be with you. But they presumed to go up unto the hilltop. Nevertheless, the ark of the covenant of the Lord and Moses departed not out of the camp. When the Amalekites came down, and the Canaanites which dwelt in the hill, and smote them, and discomfited them, even unto Hormah. So, listen, I can do all things through Christ which strengtheneth me, right? I mean, with God, there is nothing is too hard for God. And so, the children of Israel here, they tried to go up in their own power and in their own will, and they failed horribly because of that. Like I said, we're fortunate to know how it ends. We're fortunate to know how it ends. It ends at taking Canaan's land. It ends with them in it. Unfortunately, they would turn against God, and it would be taken from them. But at least in this time period here, they were able to take the land. The thing in which God desired for them to do in Numbers chapter 13, God would go ahead and do at the beginning of Joshua. He had given the land because, again, the key was God and not man. And that's where we'll find our strength. Amen. Our strength will be found in the Lord. Our strength will be found in His promises. Our strength will be found in Him. And so let's not forget that. Amen. All right. Yes, sir.
Hebrews 12:7 talks about
Mm-hmm.
Man, we're willing to go now, God. Did you give us that second chance?
Right. Right. just to elaborate on one thing, Caleb and Joshua saw things differently than the other 10, right? They saw things different. I mentioned that, but I don't think that I elaborated on that. And that was they were both seeing the same exact thing. They saw the same exact thing. The difference was the way they were viewing it, their perspective. The 10 were viewing it in a carnal manner, and the 2 were viewing it in a spiritual manner. And so that was the difference. That was the difference between their viewpoint. Like I said, they saw the same thing, saw the same exact thing. They just looked at it differently. So, all right.